Tonight we're going to be talking about Matthew 19. So we'll jump right in. And it came to pass that when Jesus had finished these sayings, he departed from Galilee and came into the coasts of Judea, beyond Jordan, and great multitudes followed him, and he healed them there. Now, he was up in the Galilee area, which is up towards the north, okay, and around the Sea of Galilee. And this is starting to be the Passion. It's getting ready. This is his last trip, okay, down to Jerusalem. He's gone back and forth to Jerusalem his entire life to fulfill all the males have to go to Jerusalem to do the sacrifices twice a year. And we know he's been several times in the scriptures. It's already told us this, but this time he's leaving his area, his home, basically. Nazareth is up in Galilee, and he's going down from this. All the Mark, Matthew, and Luke all focus on his ministry that's in and around Galilee. So this is, he's going down. It's not unusual for him to go down to Jerusalem, but they're pointing it out as is, this will be his last time, as is going to Jerusalem. Now, when we follow the scriptures and watch and see what it reads, he'll go back to Galilee, okay? But that's in his resurrection. He'll tell the disciples, go meet me there. So it says that he's gone down along the eastern shore of the Jordan. So he's still on Jordan. On the east side is actually today Jordan. It's not part of Israel. But back then it's still considered Judea, part of the Judean area at that particular time, I guess. And he went over there several times. It's called the Decapolis. It's called several other things. And he did some healings there. So this is kind of indicating, Matthew Henry said, by his telling us this location, he had his eyes on the Gentiles. Even though he was talking to the Jews and he healed many Jews, he also healed a few that we know of, non-Jews. They said, we've talked about it before in some of the lessons. And this is indicating, since he's on this side of that's where he's healing. It said many followed him and he healed them there. Many of them, of course, came to be healed. That's why they were following him. They liked his teaching, but they wanted that healing. Okay, the ones that needed it. So let's go on to the next verse, Brother Epson, number 3.
The Pharisees came also unto him, tempting him, saying unto him, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife wherever he calls?
Okay. So they threw a question up to him. They questioned him several times before about different things. And he had always answered them, and everybody marveled at his answer because they were trying to capture him in a fashion that if they said one way, they could hold that against him, and if he said another, then they could say he's blaspheming or whatever. In this particular one, though, this question is brought up because there were two schools of thought on divorce back in Jerusalem's time. They had two rabbis that were teaching prior to Jesus. Okay, this was, I don't know how many years before, but this has kind of set the precedence. Two different rabbis. One was conservative, very conservative, and one was more lax or more liberal, if you want to say. Just like today. There are people on both sides of the issues today. One of the conservative one was just that. He said, if you're going to be divorced, it's going to be because of adultery or fornication. The other one said, if she burns your toast, you can divorce her. anything that she does that you don't like, you can divorce her. And they get that from a scripture in Deuteronomy. But it's a very,
I remember that.
very kind of extrapolated out. You know, it doesn't say that, but it does go back, and it kind of refers back to that. And that's where that rabbi was focusing his deal of marriage. Now, one of the things that it talks about, that if a man was unmarried after the age of 20, except to be like a priest in the Levitical, to study on the law, he was guilty of breaking God's commandment to be fruitful and multiply. So when they was approaching their 21st birthday, they were either going to be, getting married, or they're kind of set themselves up that I'm going to not be married. I'm going to just be studying the law the whole time. This one view had a very low view of women. That's what it said. They had a high ideal for marriage, but that's at that particular time, you got to remember, they were essentially buying the wife. There was a dowry that the groom had to pay the father. And then, if the father accepted it, he would give him his daughter. And that's, if you want to say it that way, that's a bridal price. So it's like, that's my property. I bought it, and if I don't like it, I can throw it away. Do it whatever I want to with it. That was that one view. Okay? It says Rabbi Akiba, which is not one of the two, but he's another one that followed him. He even went the length saying, if a man could divorce his wife if he found a woman who he liked better and considered her more beautiful.
It would be a guy doing that.
Yeah, it would be a guy. So
He wouldn't survive.
the problem is for just any reason. These are the words that were under debate. Each school of thought understood that the Mosaic Law gave permission for divorce in Deuteronomy 24:1. And that says, when a man takes a wife and marries her, and it happens that she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some uncleanliness in her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce, puts it in her hand, and sends her out of his house. Each side knew and believed this Deuteronomy 24, and the question was, what constitutes uncleanness? Now the problem is, they were viewing this as permission, an edict, if you want to say. And we'll see in just a minute, Jesus corrects them on that. So in their question, the Pharisees tried to get Jesus to side with one teaching or the other. If they agreed, like I said, with the Hillel's saying, it was clear that Jesus didn't take the law of Moses seriously, because that's what his law said. And if he took the other one, Shammai, then Jesus became unpopular with the multitude, because the multitude liked it. Okay, yeah, I don't like her, I'm getting rid of her. And the multitude here is the men, of course. So that's why they were trying to catch him in this little catch-22. Okay, 4 and 5 and 6. If you want to read that for us next, you can, Iris.
And he answered and said unto them, have ye not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this cause shall a man leave father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. Wherefore they are no more twain but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder.
Okay. So they took it. What Jesus did, he didn't answer their question. He said, look, let's go back to the beginning. And he went back to who? Adam Eve. Now, if Adam took the case that I don't like Eve, there wouldn't be anybody around. Because there's only Adam and Eve.
That ain't right.
So, you know, he's kind of pointing out, you guys are stupid.
You
Because
couldn't compare it.
you can't, if there was one man and one woman, and when they came together, now, it started out as there was one man. Out of that man, he didn't create another being. Out of that man, he took a rib and he created another. So out of that one person that God created, he made two to become one. And he meant that, as it says, till death do they apart. No man should be able to separate them. And that's what Jesus said. So by answering the question, he didn't endorse one or the other side. He was telling them, look, this is what was meant from the very beginning. And he did this quite a bit because everybody was focusing on the minuscule Moses. I mean, that world, because Moses was the one that set the laws. God gave Moses set the laws. But he says, I'm going back to who gave Moses the laws. And that's what he's telling them. Look, you guys have misinterpreted this. It says divorce can't be seen as a ready option when things are difficult in one married life. Marriage is like a mirror. It reflects what we put into it. If one or both partners has a divorce readily in their mind as a convenient option, divorce will be much more likely. That's what it is today in a lot of the people, in a lot of the world.
They go into it with the idea, I don't like it.
Yeah, I can get out of it.
Get out of it. You know, divorce, this situation, it's always, because it deals with flesh, and it deals with the census, and this subject's always, it may mention it was controversy then, it's controversy now.
Yeah. It still brings up about problems for people because one side, one church takes it this way, another church takes it this way, another church takes it this way. So each one of them is a little different. They say one thing's okay and another's not.
If you notice too, in Mark, I think it's 10 and 16, they have some of it, part of it's the same, but some of it's not the same. I mean, they leave some stuff out.
Right.
Mark and Luke both.
Right.
But Matthew was the one that was there.
Right.
Luke and Mark, it was relayed to them.
They're taking their story from somebody else.
Yeah.
And he heard it. Matthew heard it and wrote down what he said. So he told them, he took them all the way back to Adam and Eve. And then he comes on with another saying, 7, 8, and 9. Do you want to read that for us, Brooklyn?
What page are we on?
We are on page 6 at the bottom.
Number 6?
Yep.
I'm way behind. Trying to follow y'all, but. They said unto him, why did Moses then command to give her writing of divorcement and to put her away? He said unto them, Moses, because of hardness of your hearts, suffered you to put away your wives. But from the beginning it was not so. And I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except to be for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery. And whoso marrieth her, which is put away, doeth commit adultery.
Okay. So he lays it on the line here, tells them that's the way it was. And they asked him the question, okay, why did Moses command this? It's not a commandment. That's what Jesus is saying. He didn't command that you did this. He allowed it. Why did he allow it? Because of the hardness of their heart. Because of them. Because they were, couldn't put up with one another. And it was causing a lot of confusion and a lot of problems. So he's trying to set them straight. That, you guys messed up and you weren't a way out. And Moses allowed that. to happen. Now, I can't tell you if God told Moses to do that, or if it was on his own, or what it was. But I know, when you got 2 million people clamoring after you for a lot of different things all the time, sometimes things just get out of whack. But here he's telling them, no, unless it be for fornication. Now the word fornication is porneia, the Greek word. And what that means is kind of, we have to go back 2,000 years. So we don't know exactly. Now what we've taken it to mean is that, and I may be wrong, but you correct me if I am, if something is found out after someone is married, that they had another person, okay, then that would be what we would call fornication. But they found out after they got married. They didn't know it before time. So that's why he's saying, okay, if you didn't know that and it happened, then okay, I understand. So that puts back into it maybe what happened with Moses and them. Somebody got together, they had a marriage, and now this guy finds out she's already had somebody else. I thought, all the time she was a virgin. So I can understand that situation, but here again, it said Moses permitted it. But now they tried to expand upon it. And that's what has gotten them into a lot of trouble. It goes so far that it said if they marry another, that's adultery.
I was reading before church in one of my commentaries. And it made mention too about causing her to commit adultery.
Right.
A lot of times, if women were thought upon, especially in this time, very lowly.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And a lot of times they didn't have no way of making a living.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they went,
Sure,
committed adultery. Okay.
Yeah, it's one of those things that a woman basically couldn't live if she wasn't married to someone, because she couldn't own land, she couldn't own anything outside of her husband. Okay, they were very rigid in that. Now there were some exceptions that they gave. Even we go back, they gave some in, I can't remember if we've read about that already, but the daughters, they had no sons, and to get their allocation of land, okay, Moses said, okay, I can see how they're not going to get any land because there's no sons to take it. The daughters, all those daughters would have to marry into something to get it. Well, it's not theirs to get. They should have had an allocation of that. So God allowed that. But in most cases, a woman, and I go back to in the Depression, my grandpa, Duval, he died in 29 or 30. Okay, so grandma was left there. They were sharecroppers. They had some land. They had 80 acres, and they had a house. But I'm sure he was making payments on it or whatever. It's still in the family now, so we still, evidently they owned it, whether they got it from somebody, some of his ancestors, or something. But they had no way of making any money right then. They were sharecropping, and they did as best they could for a while. They would go out and plant, and even Dad told me they'd go out and said one winter all they had to eat was turnips. They got their share of food from the sharecropper, but they had turnips. He hated turnips, even to the day he died. He did not, because that's what he ate all that winter, pretty much. Boiled turnips, baked turnips, fried turnips, and turnip soup, and turnip greens, and everything you could think of. So she married again. Okay? And that didn't last very long. I found that out. Dad never told me that. Now, I guess he was either too young to remember or not, but the other uncles don't know that. Or they don't admit it. But that's what I had to do.
Turnips good for you.
Well, it'll get you going through it. So they had to basically have something to live by, and that's true. So they were dependent upon their husband. Okay? Now this commentator puts it, except for sexual immorality, is what they put it in. And that can cover a whole lot of area. That may be more loose than what it was meant. We don't know exactly, like I said, because we're not 2,000 years ago. But it does say if the wife goes and marries another, they commit adultery. What's the sin for adultery? Stone them. So, the wife can't do a whole lot about it. She's kind of in a hard place. So let me go to the next. His disciples, verse 10, said unto him, in the case of the man be so with his wife, it is not good to marry. But he said unto them, all men can't receive this saying, save they to whom it is given. For there are some eunuchs which were so born from their mother's womb, and there are some eunuchs which were made eunuchs of men, and there be eunuchs which made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. He that is able to receive it, let him receive it. So the disciples, they're like, boy, if we can't, you can kind of tell that they were used to that. Well, if I can't divorce my wife, what's the use of getting married? Now you got to understand, Peter was at this time, I think, the only one that we know that was married. The other disciples wasn't married.
Paul wasn't around yet.
Paul was around, but he wasn't part of the bees out tearing up the place. So you can see on their mind, boy, what's if I can't, divorce my wife if I don't like her or can't get along with her, I shouldn't even get married. And in normal things, you would think, oh, that's okay. But Jesus said, look, if you can do that, that's okay. Some people make themselves eunuchs. What he's saying is they don't physically hurt themselves, but they abstain. They're abstention. Some of them are made eunuchs. Some of the people at that particular time, they were slaves, and they would make them eunuchs. That way they would let them in their household, and they could perform. And some of them were born from their mother's womb. They couldn't reproduce. So that was just one of the things. He said, whatever it is, he that is able to receive it, that's what you should do. Let him receive it. If you're going to be married, go be married. If you're going to not be married, don't be married. Is there a benefit either way? Well, we just said, the Jewish people at age 20, they thought that you ought to be fruitful and multiply. So in their mind, that's awful tough to not get married. But on the other hand, we see that if you're not married, you don't have to focus on your spouse. Now this is mainly talking about the men, I would assume, in this case, because the women, they don't have, like I said, they don't have open jobs like we do today and things like that. So and at that time they knew that. All the disciples, except for Peter, was where he had a wife. The others didn't. But they were all pretty young too, relatively. So it's hard. It says some of these aren't, said Jesus recognized that celibacy is good for some, for the one who is able to accept it. And here it talks about Paul accepting it, and of course Jesus himself.
You know, you never, when you look at that, that didn't dawn on, I thought, yeah, he was 33 years old when he died, so.
Yeah. It was past his time, to go on, to be married. Okay, 13, 14, 15. We kind of shift gears now a little bit.
Then there brought unto him little children, that he should put his hands upon them and pray. And the disciples rebuked them. But Jesus said, Suffer little children, and forbid them not to come unto me, for such is the kingdom of heaven. And he laid his hands upon them and departed hence.
Okay. Just like we talked last week about the children and the millstone being wrapped around the neck, and Jesus saying anybody that hurts these little children, should be drowned. Well, here, children here again, they were thinking the predominant theory was they should be seen and not heard. Maybe even not seen. I don't know how they thought. But they were part of their family, but they felt like that they shouldn't bother Jesus. He was there healing people. Now somebody brought their little children there. Now you're talking probably pretty young. I don't know how young, infants maybe, 1, 2 years old, 3 years old. We don't know exactly. But, people coming there wanting their children healed. And he's like, don't bother the master with this. And he said, no. Bring the little children. Suffer means bring the little children to me, and I will take care of them. Okay? Again, he makes record that such is the kingdom of heaven. Not like that we all be childlike in wanting everything, but be childlike in our faith. A child usually, until the parent instills something on that child, a child really has no fear. They don't walk up, stick a finger in a light socket. They don't know any different. Or grab a hold of a snake or something like that. They don't know any different until somebody has to tell them and teach them what to do. And that's what we need to be in our relationship with God. Whatever he tells us to do, we ought to go do it. We shouldn't have to ask him any questions. Yeah, we'll have questions, but we shouldn't have to, question him why he's wanting us to do that.
It's a whole different lesson with as parents and even grandparents. We need to bless our children.
Mm-hmm.
They need to know that they're valuable.
It says right up here in the next page on page 11, it was a Jewish custom to bring a child to the elders on the evening of the Day of Atonement to bless him and pray for him. And that's from the Mishnah, Sophirim 18 and 5. Okay, if you want to look that up if you have your nearby Mishnah. I don't. So these terms are termed by Luke in Luke 18 and 15 as tabrefa, and that's where we get that they think they were infants, maybe very even young children. Okay. And again, laying on of hands, when he suffered the children, there's several scriptures here, it's a way to bestow blessings upon them. Okay, so he suffered them in that. 16 and 17, you want to read that for us, Iris?
And behold, one came and said unto him, Good master, what good things shall I do that I may have eternal life? And he said unto him, Why callest thou me good? There is none good but one, that is God. But if thou wilt enter into life, keep the commandments.
Okay. So in some of the others, Mark and Luke tells us, and Matthew kind of tells us that he doesn't tell us directly, but he does in a minute. But this is a rich man, a rich young ruler. And so he was one of authority. He was one that had gained quite a bit. And he's telling them, or asking him, what can I do to have eternal life? Now, the way he's asking it is kind of gets to what Jesus is going to tell him. First of all, he tells him, why you call me good? And that you would think that's a good thing, right? Good master. But he's not reprimanding him, but he's asking him a question. Why do you call me good? Is anybody good on earth? That's what he's kind of getting around to. There's nobody good on earth. Everybody was born in sin. And the guy, it just kind of went over the guy's head. He didn't recognize that. But that's what he's saying. There's no person here. God is the only one that's good. There is none good but one, and that is God. But then he continues on. He didn't lay it up loose there. He's just kind of correcting him a little bit. If you will enter into life, keep the commandments. Pretty easy, isn't it? For them back then. You would think that'd be easy? Okay. What did he say next?
All of them and keep them to the books.
Go ahead and read it for us, 18, 19, and 20, Bertha.
Okay. He said unto him, which Jesus said, thou shalt do no murder, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness. Honor thy father and thy mother, and thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. The young man saith unto him, all these things have I kept from my youth up. What lack I yet?
Okay. Now here's a little bit where we don't quite get. It's kind of like getting an email and you don't get the connotations. Or when you're talking to somebody, you get the inflections and you get, how they say it and everything. Here to me, he said, well, all these things I've kept from my youth. What lack I yet? But what the commentators kind of said is like, well, I've done all that. What else do I need to do? And that's kind of arrogant, kind of proud. That, well, I've done everything that you've asked me to. Well, that's a sin right there.
He's pretty well must be that way because we find out later.
That's right. We find out later. So Paul said concerning the righteousness which is the law, he is held blameless. But he certainly did not keep them in full and perfect sense, which Jesus spoke of in the Sermon on the Mount. Paul, while he was a Pharisee, I kept doing everything in line. Boy, I was doing everything to them. So that's not such a good thing to say, per se. Because he's proud of that, that kind of makes him.
It'd be better off to say, Lord, what more can I do for you?
Well, he's not even saying that.
Yeah.
He was. He's trying to do, what can I work for you to get? How can I get there? And Jesus has told them, these are things. First of all, you got to have your relationship right with man. That's what a lot of these deal with. Okay. And then the last one is you got to have your relation, or one of the last ones, you got to have your relationship with God. And then you got to love your neighbor as yourself. That's the commandments. Oh, I kept all them. I know all about those. I've kept them. What do I lack? Okay? So Jesus told him, the next one, 21, said, Jesus said unto them, if thou wilt be perfect, go and sell that thou hast, give to the poor, and thou shalt have treasure in heaven, and come follow me. But when the young man heard that saying, he went away sorrowful. Why? For he had great possessions. So we see that he was rich. He didn't call him out that way, but he said he had great possessions. Now, who's writing this? Matthew. Bless you. The tax collector. He's rich. He knows what he's talking. He left everything to go. So Matthew knows exactly, what this kid's going through. This person's going through. And he did exactly what Jesus told this kid to do, this person to do, this young man. So he saw his arrogance a little bit, and it's not a lot, but it's kind of, it's in the way. Because he said, well, I've done all that. Well, if you want to really follow me and be a disciple, you're going to have to sell everything. Okay, does that apply to us today?
Give to the poor.
Do we have to sell everything and give it away to follow Christ?
If God requires it.
We, yes and no. Yes, spiritually, we have to sell out everything. We have to sell out everything to follow Him. No, or maybe, if God requires you to sell all that, if God tells you something, kind of learned over the years, if He tells you to give a certain amount of money somewhere, and you do it, that's good. If you don't do it, more likely He's going to get it anyway. You're not going to keep it. So it maybe not be going to Him or His services, but you're not going to keep that money.
He's giving you an opportunity.
Yeah.
And if you don't take that opportunity, well, hey, he tried.
Yeah. So we've got to be careful with what He gives us. It goes back to the talents, that we studied a few weeks ago. That they gave us something to do. The master gave us something to do with that talent. Two of them did something, and they made money, additional money for it. One of them didn't. This goes to this heart exactly here. He was very sorrowful because he couldn't give up what he'd already given. So it's not saying that riches is bad. And it sounds like that even more as we go to the next verse. But Jesus saw what this man needed. He needed to get a little bit less prideful, a little less arrogant, a little more down to
Be humble.
Yeah, to be humble, to somehow understand how that Jesus was going to live or how his disciples were living. Because, the disciples said in 23 through 26, you're going to read that for us, Brother Emerson?
Then he said, Jesus to the disciples, verily, verily, I say to you, that a rich man shall hardly enter into the kingdom of heaven. And again, I say unto you, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. When the disciples heard that, they were exceedingly amazed, saying, who then can be saved? But Jesus beheld them and said unto them, with men this is impossible, but with God all things are possible.
That's right. So he goes on and tells them that there's not going to be a whole lot of rich people in heaven. Why, do you think?
Because they're not already to follow him.
Most you have to take with a grain of salt. Not all is the same. But a lot of the people that have money, they don't want to give any money away. They work too hard to give their money away.
But just look at some of the billionaires. You talk about billionaires.
Mm-hmm.
They have a group that have formed their own little deal, and they think because they've made all this money that they're smarter than everybody
And they
else.
can control. They ought to be able to control people. They can't do that. So I did this. So they are just very arrogant. Now there are many rich people, and a lot of rich people give to organizations. Now, I'm not saying they're philanthropy, but there's just a very few that give to the cause of Christ. There are some that give, of course, but some don't. So Jesus goes here on the hyperbole again, or really extravagant. He says, it's easier for a camel, one of the largest beasts that the disciples know. You know, they're tall. They probably easily the head comes up to the top of that and the hump, to go through an eye of a needle. Now, I don't really care if you think it's the actual eye of a needle or a little bitty door that it has to get out and crawl through. What our guide said over there was in the walls of Jerusalem. They would, when they were defending the city, some of them would shoot from the top, but then some of them would shoot from the walls. They would have a little place that was about like this, about that high. They could hold their arrow out and shoot, and nobody, they'd have to be a real good archer to hit, you know, somebody like that. They called that the keyhole. And they said that's what they thought the eye of the needle was. Whatever it is, in man's eyes, it's impossible for that camel to go through something so small. And that's what Jesus said. It's with man, it is impossible. But with God, all things are possible. He will give them the ability to do that if there are people there that will, you know, rich men. And this one man wasn't used. The disciples was like incredulous. It was like, well, gosh, we don't have a chance. And they can't, the rich man, because in their minds, rich people got everything they wanted. That's what they do, typically. They can do whatever they want. They pay people off and go wherever they want. So the disciples were like, man, how in the world am I going to make it to heaven if he ain't, you know? Yeah. He's got all his fine robes on and his hat dolled up and all this stuff. And they're looking at him like, if he's not making it, how am I going to make it? So Jesus lays them straight. It's not that. You don't have to have that. And Peter takes it just a little bit further. Okay? Let's go ahead and read that. 27 through 22:30. Then answered Peter and said unto him, behold, we have forsaken all and followed thee. What shall we have therefore? And Jesus said unto them, verily I say unto you, that ye which have followed me in the regeneration, when the Son of Man shall sit on the throne of glory, ye shall also sit upon 12 thrones, judging the tribes of Israel. And every one that hath forsaken houses, or brethren, or sisters, or mothers, or father, or wife, or child, or lands, for my sake, shall receive 100-fold, and shall receive everlasting life. But many that are first shall be last, and the last shall be first. Jesus talked to them about this before, as far as having a place in the best seats in a house, the best places to live. He's telling them, you are doing your part. You guys are going to be judging people because you have followed me for doing all this. So people that give up their lives, they give up everything, they give up their families. Missionaries do that. They go over, you know, and live in a country, and they don't see their families a lot, and they don't see, you know, people that do that. It's amazing. They can do that. But some people can't do that. And he's just saying, you will get your reward for that. This is a high reward for those. They're going to be sitting on the thrones. So he's telling them, the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. It says there's an old legend, Romus legend, that there was a brother who preached very mightily and had won many souls to Christ, and was revealed to him one night in a dream that in heaven he would have no reward for all that he had done. He asked to whom the reward would go to, and an angel told him that it would go to an old man who used to sit on the pulpit stairs and pray for him. Well, it may be so, though it is more likely that both would share the master's praises. We shall not be rewarded, however, simply according to our apparent success. Charles Spurgeon. So what little part we can play, as I said before, whatever little part. If it's phoning people and telling them, you know, we missed you guys, we did that, just about everybody can do that. So whatever we can do, you may not be able to work on the computers or preach or teach or sing or whatever, but there's something that you can do and you need to find it. We have several of the ladies that I know of, they make quilts. They send them to the hospitals for the new babies that don't have anything when they come in. There's something that we can do. So, well, that's all we have tonight. Hope everybody good.
Now it goes on.
Yeah, it comes on.
Now.
We're finished.